Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something really fascinating. We're going to weave together four completely different frontiers of human innovation just to see how they're shaping our geopolitical and our ethical boundaries. We'll be pulling directly from recent MIT Technology Review analyses, some major aerospace milestones, and comprehensive industry reports to give you a really clear map of exactly where humanity is heading. So, here's our agenda for today. First, a quarter century in space. Second, 2026 breakthroughs in energy and biotech. Third, AI empires and geopolitics. And finally, the responsible tech imperative. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, a quarter century in space. It's pretty wild to think about, but for a solid quarter of a century now, humanity has maintained a continuous presence orbiting 5 miles per second above Earth. Literally. This monumental milestone in human engineering and diplomacy kicked off back in September 2000 with the MACE-2 experiments, which, by the way, was the very first active U.S. scientific investigation performed on the International Space Station. And just weeks after that, Expedition 1 arrived. From there, we've evolved all the way to complex achievements, like astronaut Kate Rubins running DNA sequencing experiments aboard the station in 2021. And looking ahead to August 2025, veteran astronaut Mike Fink is slated to join Expedition 73. It really reflects this massive, long-term collaborative triumph. But honestly, there is a profoundly human element behind all of this high-tech hardware. When Expedition 1 commander Bill Shepard first arrived at the space station, the Russian service module was actually missing a work table that they had trained with. And instead of just waiting 6 months for a replacement, Shepard and his crew just kind of had to act as blue-collar maintenance guys. They literally built their own work table right there in space, using tools they'd smuggled on board. They even inscribed "the best from nothing" in Latin right on the side of it. It's just a perfect reminder that every grand frontier requires relentless, on-the-fly problem-solving. And this quote from MIT-trained astronaut Mike Fink absolutely hits the nail on the head. He perfectly summarizes the collaborative spirit of this era. Building the ISS was hands down one of the most difficult things humanity has ever attempted, yet it succeeded through shared international goals. But keep this cooperative spirit in the back of your mind, because it serves as a stark contrast to the highly competitive technological frontiers we're about to explore right down here on Earth. Which brings us to Section 2, 2026 breakthroughs in energy and biotech. So, looking at MIT Technology Review's list of breakthrough technologies for 2026, we're seeing rapid acceleration on two distinct tracks. On one side, we have this desperate need for sustainable power, and on the other, the radical rewriting of human biology itself. And the thing is, these aren't isolated fields at all. They are intimately connected by their massive resource demands. The crucial takeaway here is that while we're unlocking incredible, basically science fiction level capabilities in biotech, we're talking about things like base-edited babies, genetic de-extinction, and advanced embryo scoring, we are simultaneously constrained by immense energy demands. To calculate these massive biological advancements and to power the hyperscale data centers that modern AI requires, we absolutely need massive energy breakthroughs. That's exactly why we're seeing a concurrent push for things like sodium-ion batteries, which are cheaper and safer than lithium for large grids, alongside next-generation compact nuclear reactors. Bottom line, energy constraints are the ultimate bottleneck for both our biological and our digital ambitions.
Moving on to Section 3, AI empires and geopolitics.
Now, that insatiable demand for energy and data brings us to our third frontier, and this one is far less collaborative than the International Space Station and much, much more competitive. Impartially speaking, according to analyst Karen Ha, the term AI empire isn't just some convenient metaphor, it's actually a structural reality. Ha points out that historic empires seized resources and human labor to enrich a really small elite at the center. And today, as we build out this digital frontier, we're seeing a consolidation of power that closely mirrors that historical imperialism. We've got AI giants hoovering up massive amounts of data, utilizing poorly paid workers to moderate it, and then placing incredibly energy-hungry data centers in localized areas that ultimately have to bear all the environmental costs. To analyze this complex new geopolitical reality, MIT Technology Review and the Financial Times actually formed a strategic editorial partnership just to track these specific battlegrounds. They're neutrally observing how the race for technological supremacy, particularly between the United States and China, will dictate the future of our society. Because, this isn't just about who makes the smartest chatbot anymore. These battlegrounds are going to determine the future of military defense, global energy consumption, and even the end of personal privacy as we know it. This matters to all of us because this technology is fundamentally reshaping global power dynamics right before our eyes.
And that leads us straight into Section 4, the Responsible Tech Imperative.
So if the global tech race is truly this intense, how on earth do we establish ethical boundaries? Well, according to a joint report by MIT Technology Review Insights and ThoughtWorks that surveyed leaders about the barriers to adopting responsible technology, the single biggest hurdle, cited by 52% of all respondents, is a lack of senior management awareness. Right behind it, organizational resistance to change and internal competing priorities, both sitting at 46%. It essentially shows that the desire for ethics often hits a total brick wall the second it reaches the executive level. But it gets even more interesting when we split this data up by company size, because a really fascinating reality emerges. For smaller organizations, those with revenues below $10 billion, they struggle the most with getting their senior leaders on board, hitting 57%. However, for massive corporations with revenues over $10 billion, their biggest roadblock is an ingrained organizational resistance to change, sitting at 52%. Essentially, it's like small ships have captains who are looking the wrong way, and the massive ships are just way too heavy to turn quickly.
And perhaps even more concerning is this. A striking 59% of the organizations surveyed define responsible tech merely as fully complying with existing regulations, things like GDPR. Think about what that means. The heavy lifting of actually defining technological ethics isn't being done by the creators of the tech. It's largely being deferred to governments and regulators. Organizations are basically viewing ethics as a compliance checklist rather than a core mission. And honestly, that's a pretty risky stance when you consider that the technology is evolving way, way faster than any government could ever write laws to govern it.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to ask ourselves a vital question. We've journeyed from astronauts building tools by hand in orbit to scientists programming the genetic makeup of the next generation, all while AI empires race for global dominance. The innovation is absolutely undeniable. But what you really need to take away from this is that our technical capabilities are currently vastly outpacing our organizational ethics. Will our sense of responsibility grow as fast as our empires of innovation? Or will we be left trying to regulate the future long after it's already arrived? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll leave you to ponder that one.